This story was shared at the time by a young man who will remain anonymous. We will only call him Francis. Today, he is in a psychiatric hospital due to the situations he went through after encountering the devil's blood. With the permission of his father and Francis, the narrated events are shared. Francis mentions that he cannot be where there is darkness because he can still perceive someone behind him, but only when there is no light. Without further ado, this is Francis's version of events. I can feel that I am going crazy. There have been several times that when I see myself in the mirror, I inevitably have to look behind me first. There is someone who has been with me since I made a bad decision. And when I least expect it, that person appears, standing behind me, without saying anything, and when I turn, I no longer see it. I think I know when all this started. There are moments in our lives in which a bad decision can take us to the brink of a radical change. Moments in which you think you know what you are doing. However, moments can arise that, without realizing it, there is no turning back. I want to tell you something that happened to me a year ago. I had everything: money, women, a good position at work. I lacked nothing, but my whole life changed because of the devil's blood. I worked in my father's company. My job was to attract more clients to the family business, and that's why I spent my time traveling. So I contacted a client who was very far from my city, so I would have to make a fairly long trip. Since I had just bought a new car, and I wanted to test it by driving as much as possible, so armed with courage and with several energy drinks that I bought, I prepared to travel. After several hours of driving, staying awake was quite a challenge. I was already tired and it was late. I looked for a place where I could stay. Then I could see that there was a sign that indicated a detour to a small town. I thought about going to look for accommodation, or at least park and rest a little. It was already quite late and everything was dark. There was almost no light in that forgotten town. And just when I had made it to the idea of parking the car and sleeping until I recovered, I saw something that caught my attention. Not far from the town, I could notice a strong glow. Since it seemed to be the only house with light, I headed there in the hope of finding someone awake. Such was my luck that it was a bar. No one could be seen outside, but you could hear that inside there were several people talking. I parked the car right next to the bar. I approached the door and realized that it was half open, so I just pushed it. To be honest, I didn't expect to see so many people because it was already almost 2 in the morning, and it was the middle of the week. Some people were speaking softly. I approached the bartender and asked him for a place where I could sleep, but the man told me that I wouldn't find accommodation in the town. What I could do was stay and rest in the bar. The bartender showed me a table. I had no choice but to accept his proposal, so I settled down, and to take advantage of being there, I ordered a whiskey. I couldn't hold even 2 sips of what he gave me to drink. I complained to the bartender because what he had given me to drink was of very poor quality. "Excuse me, good man, you will understand that there is not much movement here, and I cannot afford to offer expensive drinks." The bartender apologized to me. I understood it well, but I did not want to be left with that taste in my mouth, so I asked him to serve me his best drink. He remained silent for a few moments and quickly went to prepare it. I was already falling asleep when he arrived with a drink. "What you see here is the devil's blood, if you dare. It is on the house." This made me laugh a little. The truth is, I didn't believe he would give me a drink. When I was about to drink it, the bartender stopped me. "I want to warn you that what you will drink is not just any drink. Your life will change completely. You will be able to drink what the devil has in his veins." The warning seemed absurd and illogical to me, so I thanked him for the drink and drank it all in one sip. At the moment it passed through my mouth, I felt a burning sensation throughout my body. It did not seem to be as liquid as it looked, because when I drank it, it felt thick, and when I swallowed it, my body gave me a chill that shook me completely. The hairs on my arms stood up, my nose was completely unblocked, and I was already feeling quite energetic, and the only thing I could think was, ask for another one. I don't remember the time I stopped drinking. The last thing I remember was that people weren't leaving the bar. On the contrary, more and more people arrived. In the corner where I had settled, I fell asleep, and after a while a man woke me up, quite annoyed. He asked me to leave the table. I got up and left the bar without looking behind me. It was still dark. I got into the car, and I saw the time on the dashboard. It was already 5 a.m. I decided to move the car and go a few blocks into town, so that as soon as dawn came, I would look for some breakfast. Without realizing it, I woke up at 9 a.m. I still had the bitter taste of the devil's blood on my palate. Although I began to taste it again, I stuck out my tongue to taste that flavor that had remained on my lips. I started to look for a restaurant, but I didn't find anything. Very few people and very elderly people were just walking through the streets or sitting outside their houses. But what caught my attention is that many of them couldn't take their eyes off me. It seemed like they had never seen a car. I stopped for a moment to ask directions from an old woman who was watering her plants. She behaved quite strangely when she saw me. She didn't answer anything I asked, but when she saw my car, it seemed like she had seen the devil himself, and she quickly got into her house without telling me anything. "Crazy old lady," I said out loud, and decided to go back to the bar and ask there if they could tell me about somewhere to eat. But what was my surprise that I couldn't find the bar anywhere. I was pretty sure I had taken the same path. I couldn't be wrong because the bar was located at the end of the town. I passed by the same place several times, but I couldn't find it anymore. Even the marks from my car's tires still remained there. Already exhausted from searching, I decided it was better to leave at once to find something to eat. After a couple of hours, I had already finished the meeting I had to attend. I started to look for a place where I could bathe and rest. I arrived at a hotel, left the car parked right at the entrance to reserve a room. It was here where things started to get strange. I asked the receptionist for a single room. She kindly asked me if I wanted the room with a king-size bed or separate beds. This was funny to me because I came alone, a situation that I let the girl know. "Excuse me, sir, I thought the person who came in your car was with you." Her comment puzzled me because I quickly turned to look at my car, but I didn't see anyone. I thought the receptionist was confused. That night, while I was bathing, I couldn't stop drinking water from the shower. I felt an insatiable thirst that was burning inside me. I attributed all of this to the devil's blood. I could taste a bitter and metallic taste in my mouth. I know it will sound strange, but that taste only increased my desire to drink more. I brushed my teeth several times to get rid of that taste, but it didn't help much. I went to bed, turned on the TV, and without realizing it, I fell asleep in an instant. I don't remember what time it was, but I did know that it was already very late. The television was still on, but its light bothered me. I turned it off at that moment. In the reflection of the television, I could see someone sitting in the armchair that was next to me. I turned around quickly, but no one was there. I didn't know if I was still asleep. Everything happened very quickly. In the reflection of the television, I could no longer see anyone. I sat on the bed for several minutes thinking about what I had seen. I could still feel the presence of someone else in the room. My body felt tired and heavy. I could feel a great weight on my shoulders. The next morning my thirst was already unbearable. I had not been able to fall asleep after what had happened, and all night I couldn't stop thinking about the taste of that drink. I could feel a terrible pain on my shoulders. It seemed like I had been carrying something all night. I felt exhausted and without energy. I thought it might be a long hangover. The long way back was a real torture, with the intense heat, and that insatiable thirst I felt made me delirious, since several times I thought I saw someone in the back seat. It became a habit for me to look in the rear-view mirror. Fortunately, I arrived safely, but it was very late. I couldn't drive home, so I decided to go with my parents. I need to sleep. Could you lend me a room? I told my old man when he opened the door. He looked at me very confused. From this point on, the story of what happened next comes from the words of Francis's father. Because what his son was telling were words without meaning, so it was adjusted in the best way to make it more understandable. I was surprised to have seen my son at that moment, because I had not seen him for a long time, and also that he was accompanied by a woman. She didn't greet me, she just walked by. I decided not to bother them. Perhaps it had been a very long trip, and I should let them rest. However, the next morning I didn't hear them. It was already midday, and neither of them left the room. That's when I decided to go ask them if everything was in order. But when I got to the room, I didn't find anyone. In fact, I don't think they even slept there. Maybe I hadn't noticed, and they decided to go out to eat something, because when I looked outside the house, I no longer saw my son's car. I felt worried. I didn't know if things were okay, so I decided to give him a call, but his cell phone was in the bedroom. Apparently he had forgotten it there. I just had to wait for them to return, but he didn't come back.
Hello?
Late at night I received a call from the police. They had arrested my son. They recommended that I go as quickly as possible. When I arrived, they asked me if my son was medicated, since he kept hallucinating that a woman was torturing him. He was completely naked. He only had a blanket. He had scratches on his back and a very penetrating smell. You could see the terror on his face. I also felt terrified just by seeing him. He saw me, and before greeting me or giving me a hug, he asked me not to turn off the lights because she was there with him. I asked him about what had happened, where he had gone and with whom, but when I asked him who that woman was, his face changed, surprised. He only asked me, "Do you see that woman too?" Actually, what he told me was not very coherent. His story seemed to me largely made up, and several things made no sense. He seemed confused, disoriented from where he was and what had happened, so I will try to explain as best as I can. Francis went into the room to sleep. Without taking off his shoes, he threw himself on the bed and hoped to fall asleep quickly because he was so exhausted, but a woman's voice sounded from behind his head. He didn't understand what she said, but it did cause him to get scared. He looked everywhere but didn't see anyone, and again behind him he could hear that woman's voice say the following:
"Drink a little more. Just a little more."
As soon as Francis heard this, he felt quite thirsty again. The metallic taste in his mouth felt stronger than before. He turned around to see where that voice was coming from, but he didn't see anyone. When he looked in the mirror, he could see behind him a dark silhouette that looked like a woman much taller than him. He ran to turn on the light, but she had disappeared. He shouted at her several times, asking her to show herself.
Show yourself.
Then he
Where
felt
are
something
you?
scratching his back from his right shoulder to his left side. Francis felt a lot of pain and was totally confused. He saw that the window was open and decided to escape through there. He still had the car keys with him, so he decided to quickly flee. He told me that while he was driving, he felt the burning in his back from the scratch that thing had made on him. He could feel the blood sticking to his shirt. He didn't know where to run. He just drove aimlessly, constantly looking at the rearview mirror to make sure that woman was not behind. But in the blink of an eye, that woman was already sitting in the back seat. He quickly turned on the car light, and that woman disappeared. Without realizing it, he arrived at the bus station. He left the car badly parked. He doesn't remember if he left the keys attached or they fell off. Without looking back, he ran to the bus station to ask for help. That's when he realized that he didn't have his cell phone. He saw a person who was making a call and asked to borrow his cell phone, but the person refused to lend it, and it was easy for Francis to snatch it away. He tried to call home, but he told me that he was so scared that he didn't remember the number. His back hurt so much that he had to sit on the floor, and when he least expected it, a couple of police officers were already holding him up. He asked them for help, telling them that there was someone who was chasing him, but the police did not pay attention and threw him to the ground to immobilize him. He remained lying there, unable to move. He felt that unbearable thirst in his throat again. The taste of blood in his mouth felt stronger than ever. When the patrol arrived to pick him up, he took advantage of the moment to get rid of them and flee. There was a fountain nearby and he jumped into it. He still felt too thirsty and couldn't quench it. The police arrived instantly. Several police officers took over to arrest him. He was shouting for help and shouting that they should not turn off the lights, that there was a woman there who was watching him. The doctor who started seeing him gave us his diagnosis, mentioning that Francis had symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia and that something had triggered it. To be very honest, I thought that this had appeared due to the way of life my son led. He did not sleep well and he drank a lot. What catches my attention the most is that at home, while he is still in the psychiatric hospital, I can still hear noises. More specifically, the voice of a woman saying,
Drink a little more. Just a little more.